and plenty of times for open line. Do want to hear from you. What do you think the governor of the state of Colorado has all of a sudden decided 10 o'clock if he could just shut off the drinking and last call of the bar by 10 o'clock, then the Booger Cooney virus will stop the spread because people will not get drunk enough to make piss poor decisions. And I hate to break the news to him, but people make piss poor decisions no matter what. They just do that. And he says this is targeting the 20 to 29-year-old crowd. And I'm guessing if they really want to continue drinking or to light one up on a Friday night or Saturday night, they're going to either start earlier or just stock up at the liquor store. And by the way, somebody asked me this: is there going to be last call at the pot shop? I don't know what time the marijuana stores, do they have last call now, 10 o'clock, or is it just the alcohol industry that has last call? Just a question for all of you to contemplate and consider. Ladies and gentlemen, every Wednesday morning at this time, we're joined by Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey, usually in the 7 o'clock hour, running a little bit late today, not his fault, our fault, and glad to have him here on the radio show. Steve, welcome. Sir, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jimmy. So great to be with you. I told you, your producer, I said, I can just imitate Jimmy, and then I'll do me, right? And then I do terrible imitations. But to the governor and to closing of the bars, I mean, I don't know why anybody's obeying any of the laws. Nobody in Portland, Oregon obeys laws. Nobody obeys laws about graffiti. The thought process, I want to say this in all seriousness, is the governor's personal hygiene and personal manners, is he like totally out of control? I mean, the thought process that graffiti would be all over the State House, as a thought process like a year ago, or take Hickenlooper as governor, or take the last Republican, or anybody, anywhere, would allow 1 second of graffiti. It shows you what his thought process is. When I was the mayor of Cranston, Jimmy, there was a graffiti problem when I became mayor. Do you know what I did? I actually went to restaurant owners. It was a bike path, and some people graffitied it. And I couldn't do it. I asked the owner to take it off and whitewash it. He goes, Mayor, I've already done it twice. I said, just do it one more time. I legally can't do it. And they did it. I put policemen in bushes all night long till they came back. Nothing better than a white wall for people to come back to. And what you find is that there's very few people who do graffiti who destroy an entire city. And we caught them, and we arrested them, and we put them in jail. And then I went to teenage people's house to their parents. I knew there were two different teenagers. I went to the house, knocked on the door. I said, we're going to catch your son. We're going to throw his you-know-what in jail. Where is he? We didn't have a graffiti problem after that. People knew, let's go to Providence, right? But now you have a situation with the governor, like, is it possible that they don't have anybody standing nearby to say, don't do that? Or it's not possible. The whole thing down, and this is the only thing that bodes well, not for Cory Gardner, but for the president. As people see this continually happening, some people must be wondering, this is what Democrats do. And yes, this is what Democrats do.
The law and order message on the national front is going to play very well, especially when Governor Polis, and again, I can't, like you, I can't get into his psyche. Why is it that Governor Polis would even allow this, other than he thinks it was going to advance some political cause? But I think this is the biggest boomerang that's ever going to bite him on the rear end, because people, if you go down and see that Capitol, I posted videos of it, and it's not just one night they snuck up on him. The State Patrol is still down there, really not allowed, and they're outnumbered, not allowed to do anything. He could have hired extra State Patrol. They could have brought in the National Guard, and they're still vandalizing that thing last night. And 8 weeks, Steve, it's been 8 weeks, and every night there's more vandalism.
And you just think about, go back to Katrina, the hurricane. You had a Democratic mayor of New Orleans, and people were crying, and they were on top of a roof, and you had that Shepard Smith guy crying, where is the president? And all you had over in Mississippi, which was hurt just as bad, was Haley Barbour, who I've had lunch with. What a funny guy. The governor at that time was Haley Barbour, and he just announced, we are going to shoot looters. Guess what? Go back and look at it, folks. There was no looting in Mississippi. People themselves knew they could shoot looters. The police were going to shoot looters. Why? And I'm asking this in all seriousness. Why haven't they shot some people in at least Portland, Oregon? Why haven't they shot? I mean, people are coming into federal buildings. This is beyond anything I would ever put up with if I was in office. Anything. I don't even know what to say. This is beyond anything we can imagine. And think of the scenes of Governor Polis running for re-election, and all you're going to do is broadcast what the State House looks like. By the way, probably when he's running for re-election, it's going to look the same. He kind of likes it. Does he think it's okay to people to defecate or go to the bathroom out in public, just wandering down the streets like the old Saudi Arabians did when they first got money and went to London? Is that how people should live? Just go to the bathroom in the street, just kneel down, whatever.
Downtown Denver has become, right across from the Capitol, you have the park there that is just an utter mess, and that's a homeless city, if you will. Hundreds of people piled in there. No social distancing. No, we get lectured about our masking and social distancing all the time, but Governor Polis is just perfectly fine with the homeless problem right across the street from the state capitol. So it's you and I, we're the bad guys to Governor Polis, and the looters and the homeless and those without social distancing and masks. Jared Polis leaves them alone, but Steve Laffey and Jimmy Lakey, we're selfish bastards, Steve, selfish bastards.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Let me ask you, I heard the story is that we were having connection issues, and I was waiting on the engineers to connect the 2 wires and 5 wires and to splice it all together and all the fun stuff. And I heard this story, I thought of you. Overnight, the United States government decided that they were going to shut down the consulate or the embassy, the consulate in Houston for the Chinese. Give me your take. What's happening right now?
Well, this is a good move. In fact, how could it not have been? How could it ever been open? It's great that they've closed it. We know right now the people who are thieves, the thugs of communist China, are probably burning everything in the building or putting into piles and so forth because they have the right to do that inside of an embassy or consulate, I guess. But how was it ever open? Why would we have communist China operating out of Houston? Are they operating out of every other city? We have to ask this question. What happened? What will it take to stop the incrementalism, though, of the president, of the Republicans, of the Democrats, the incrementalism of getting tougher with communist China? It needs to be one fell swoop. For example, back to the trade deal, the terrible trade deal when we operate as if we're, Nicaragua selling, bananas or something. People have to know this, that communist China never keeps its trade deals. They are buying, 3% of the amount of produce they're supposed to buy, or soybeans or whatever, to help Iowa in the general election or something. I mean, they're doing less than 50% of the manufacturing goods. Why don't we just call a halt to it? Do the Steve Laffey method. We don't trade with you anymore. The president wants to win re-election. Whip 100% tariffs on all these goods. Make China the real bad person, because they are. They're responsible for definitely out of a lab, by the way. We know now, definitely out of a lab. We know that this Chinese virus escaped, and we know that they did it on purpose to let people leave to come to other countries so they wouldn't be the only people devastated about it, right? So 140,000 dead, whatever it is. How does this go? Like, we don't do anything? Like Pearl Harbor, there were only 3,500 people dead. Only, I mean, I don't mean to say only, it was terrible. There was only 3,500 dead there. We've got hundreds of thousands of people all across the world because of communist China dead. Dead, D-E-A-D, dead. What does it take, Jimmy?
Back to September the 11th, we know what we did after that response, and that was a few thousand people as well, and there's a lot more than that have been affected by this virus, not to mention just the death of business, not just the death of human life, the death of businesses, even this new edict by Governor Polis. The real fallout of that's going to be bars and restaurants that were already struggling to survive, and it all goes back to the root of the Chinese Communist Party, and the question is, what are we going to do about it?
And we have to do something. In fact, there's a number of things we can do. One of the mistakes right now would not be to take troops out of South Korea, Mr. President. Please, come on, stop this. You could just announce that you're a pacifist. Take them all out if that's what you want. But you're not going to send a message to Japan, to South Korea, to Australia, which has all the minerals, right? And by the way, the people in Australia have no guns. How stupid are they? But India, by the way, has lost 20 soldiers to communist China's army on these disputed, although to me they're not disputed. The president finally did announce that the South China Sea, that the territorial rights do not belong to communist China. That was decided by the international courts 5 years ago. It took America till last week to say they totally agreed with it. So I guess, listen, from reading John Bolton's book, I'm guessing Pompeo is doing the best he can to tell the president this is what we have to do. But right now, if the president wants to win re-election, he needs to build some allies, and he needs to I mean, if it were me, I would have already done this. We would put in offensive arms into Taiwan. We would doing everything to buttress Taiwan to make sure Communist China could. We got to bottle up Communist China with their own problems. Does anybody not get this? Is how you do diplomacy? You bottle up the other people. You don't let them bottle up you. You bottle them up in Taiwan so they don't go to Pearl Harbor again. Is this obvious? Or am I the only one who thought of this? You bottle up Russia. You bottle up all of them, right? First of all, you bottle up Russia by getting them out of Venezuela tomorrow morning. But am I the only person who thought of this? No, of course not. Everybody who is a strong national defense person from last 50, 100, 200 years, Napoleon thought this up. And then he made a fatal mistake. People think this up, but we're not bottling up the other side. We are bottled up by this Chinese virus, and the Republicans have made the tragic mistake, as I sent over to you, once you start arguing the Democratic cause, do they say thank you? No. Beto O'Rourke says that Texas has a death culture because of the Republican Party. This is the Beto O'Rourke who wants abortion on demand for anybody, any woman, anytime, and he wants all assisted suicide for anybody any doctor they can get to put people to death who are older. But yet the reason that Beto O'Rourke gets to call this to the Republican Party is because the Republican Party, led by the president, responded to the Chinese virus with numbers. Instead of saying this is what you need to do, they all decided we're going to send 12% of the world's GDP in 1 year is what the world's going to do to send people money. Are people crazy? Do they not realize what's going on? I think they do. The old-time Republicans like me do. We know the devastating effect of inflation is coming, and the weak dollar is devastating for the average middle-class family. Yet here we are arguing about small potatoes when what is really important is the U.S. dollar.
As a Republican at all. His name is John Kasich, and former governor of Ohio one term. His dad was a mailman. I remember that from the presidential debates a couple of years ago. But John Kasich, evidently a never-Trumper, has decided he's going to speak at the Democrat convention and endorse old Uncle Joe Biden. Give me your thoughts. John Kasich, I'm sure you've heard of that fella, and you've probably run across him a couple of times.
I've been on Fox News with John Kasich when he filled in for Bill O'Reilly. I was on the O'Reilly Factor with John Kasich. And he couldn't have been a nicer guy. And for whatever reason, 20 years ago, he was a right-of-center Republican. But I want to make sure people understand this one thing. And this just goes for John Kasich and everybody else. It's one thing to say, I can't vote for so-and-so as a hardline, conservative, populist Republican. I can't vote for a $4 trillion deficit person or president or senator. And I can't. This is Steve Laffey. It's a vastly different thing to say, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. Right? It's vastly different. Steve Laffey, my family, we don't buy into the least worst theory because the least worst theory has given us two terrible candidates for president. I'm sorry, folks. The $4 trillion plus deficit, I can't live with. I can't live with Maduro in Venezuela. There's a lot of things I love, like the conservative judges, and I guess there is some deregulation. Haven't seen it recently, but there's things that I can't live with. You could, not you, Jimmy, personally, but you, the listener, can. I can't. I only do budgets that balance. I only do surpluses, right? I only do market forces, not keeping rates so low that we're in another debt trap that's going to destroy America. You can. But it's vastly different for John Kasich, who obviously has lost his mind, to go to the Democratic National Convention and tell everybody that Joe Biden is a better candidate. That's a disaster for John Kasich permanently. And I remember, John Kasich worked for CNN after he got out of office, and he did everything he could to stop the pro-gun movement when he was ending his term in Ohio. So I don't know what really happened to the guy. Does he think Joe Biden's going to balance the budget too? But that's. I just want to make sure people get that. That's what's really the disaster when people do this kind of stuff.
And you mentioned, alluded to the first part of our interview, you talked about if President Trump stays on this law and order theme and people like Jared Polis continue to let recklessness happen in the streets, Portland, Chicago, Denver, that gives President Trump an opening. And then you sent me a news story that said Biden pledges to end Trump's Muslim ban on his first day in office. And you say that you think this could be if Biden just keeps talking, he's limiting his chances here.
Yes, both presidential candidates, and Biden almost in particular, because the law and order thing appeals to the suburban mom in western Pittsburgh, right? So suburb of Pittsburgh, right? So that appeals to them, the law and order thing. But the Biden thing about the Islamic ban, that appeals to only his base. So this is the problem for Joe Biden. Listen, on the Rasmussen reports, can the president win when he's down 9? He could win. The Senate will definitely be Democrat. So we could have a Republican president. It's probably a 20% chance now for him to win. But Biden, he has to learn how to help him. Just as a political analysis, I don't like the guy at all. He has to learn how to help himself. These things don't help him get to there's still 8% of the people who don't know how they're going to vote. They're going to decide the election. If it were me and I was advising the president or running for president, I would go after them. Everything else is set in stone, right? We're a divided country. We're pre-Civil War, Kansas-Nebraska Act. So that's where we are. And it's going to get more violent as time goes on. So make sure I got 3 guns last week. I'm going to maybe get some more. Anyway, God, I know the time's up, but I love you, man. You're doing a great job. All right. Love you, buddy. So that ends the show. I just thought I'd do it out here today, but here's my fun. One thing we didn't get across to Jimmy, we ran out of time, is this is the worst bargain of all time ever being made by the American public. Remember, the American public bargain in 2008 and 9 is the Fed did everything they were supposed to do, right? I'll just show you the stuff over here. There's Long's Peak up there. The bargain that they made was that they got FDIC insurance raised by $125,000, even though no middle-class family had $125,000 in any one bank. I'm joking. Maybe somebody did. Meanwhile, large banks got to crush small banks, and J.P. Morgan, Jamie Dimon, the guys at Wells Fargo, nobody went to jail despite violating many securities laws. They paid huge fines but didn't go to jail, and Jamie a billionaire. That's what happened. Large destroyed small. This time, it's worse. Large restaurants are destroying small restaurants, right? And it's going to continue. It's bargain for America then come to you dollar to pay off the debt. I watched former Senator Judd out of New Hampshire wrote an article. He just repeated what I had said 2 weeks ago on the Jimmy Lakey show. That I said, how do you pay down $30 trillion in debt? You do it with how do you do it with by cutting the dollar or having inflation, or you pay off half of it because you have massive inflation. He wrote an article about how the dollar would be worth 60 cents. This kind of thing, if you're old enough to remember the middle of the 70s, tends to destroy the fabric of America. And not only that, forget about the pricing signals, the invisible hand of Adam Smith, and how the pricing signals get set to give us the best allocation of resources. No one really denies that, except for some communist people or the people storming the federal buildings. They're just stupid, half mentally ill, half crazy people who are doing this kind of stuff. And we let them now, so there's going to be more of them. But this stuff really hurts Americans. I'm talking about the Americans from Edgewood, Cranston, Rhode Island that I grew up with. Picture that family in the 70s. We were being destroyed by inflation. And the responses of whip inflation now and all the other stupid stuff really hurt the competitive nature of America. Took till Paul Volcker, Ronald Reagan, of course, Pope John Paul II, and so forth, to really come in, and we had 8-9 good years. Since then, we've elected, and the Fed has run this terrible program. But if you notice, and I'll leave you with this last couple of points, if you notice the articles that are in the paper, I was telling my wife this yesterday, you will see that every article about the Federal Reserve will start with the Fed's doing an excellent job. They'll say something, the Fed did what it had to do. There's always a commentator from Goldman Sachs, whatever. That's not true. It's a total bald-faced lie. If indeed the Fed was saying, if indeed it was to end business cycles, how is it done for a job? It's done a terrible job, right? Terrible, terrible job at the Federal Reserve Board. The other thing that comes up now, which is so obvious, is they talk about China's first country to grow at 3% this last quarter, pulling out of the communist Chinese virus. And then they have a sentence on every article now. Although some people think that communist China's, they don't say communist China, I do. Communist China's numbers are dubious, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's like saying 2 plus 2 is 7. Now, some people still think 2 plus 2 is 4. China lies about all the numbers, which is why, when it comes to geopolitics, all this stuff is connected. You see, the real problem is Pompeo said in Venezuela that Maduro had to leave on February 19th of 2019. He had to leave that day. The fact that he's still there gives Russia, China, Iran, don't even get me started about North Korea, gives them all the ability to keep circling around us. And that has to change. Anyway, but these are the terrible bargains Americans are settling for as they receive a check for $1,200. They're going to lose half their purchasing power. Now, you can go back and watch Richard Nixon tell you, as long as you don't leave America, you won't notice. But that's not true. You will notice. Take anybody living in England today who wants to invest in America. The dollar's down 5% this year. What if you think it's going down 20% next year? How many plants are you going to open up in America? None. You're not going to repatriate dollars back to euros or to British pounds, or to Swiss francs, depending on where you are, if you think it's going down. America always and everywhere needs a strong dollar policy. And we unfortunately have a weak dollar president who wants negative interest rates. Who would have thought that the president of the United States as a Republican, we have a Republican who leads the charge to imitate Democrats on these type of topics. Now, people love Trump. They can go off about him. But these things he's wrong on, and these ultimately are going to destroy the fabric of our society. Anyway, I better go. I got to go back and take a look at what I'm doing here. How do I finish?